Welcome back to World this morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is your very favorite Shazad Khan. I am Shaza Hashmi. It's a beautiful, beautiful day over here. It's Monday, yes, and I hope all of you are going to have an amazing week. We said we're going to talk about education. We're going to do that, yes, because Shazad, ever since the pandemic started, first of all, everyone was so confused what to do with schools because, well, social distancing was a must, right? So everything eventually moved online. People started getting used to it. They were making blunders as well, but learning, because it was the first time everyone had to sort of change the entire facade of education as well. Then things opened back because Pakistan was really smart in dealing with COVID-19, so schools reopened. Sometimes exams were happening, sometimes they were getting cancelled. It was just a state of confusion for a lot of students out there, but also the same for teachers too. So what is it now? Are we really back on track?
I don't think so that we're really back on track. Obviously, things are getting normalized. Alhamdulillah, the universities have opened up. You know, the students are going back as well. But we still do not know whether, God forbid, if there's going to be another wave.
I hope not.
God forbid. I mean, if only the people kind of comply to the SOPs being put in place, I don't think that we'll actually have to go back to that, because this is where we left from, ladies and gentlemen. But I think that the most important aspect is that as soon as the pandemic broke out, ladies and gentlemen, we all know that the quality of education dropped. Because in terms of online education systems or the learning management system, nobody was very well aware, nobody was very well equipped. You know, HEC tried to help the universities as well, and then there were a few universities who developed their own softwares so that they can make sure that the students out there can kind of keep up with the education. I think in this time, Shafqat Mahmood Sahab is, I think, one of those ministers who's been loved by every student
so resilient,
out
I swear.
And you know, imagine that, you know, you passing without kind of attempting to give an exam is something which is a blessing, and everybody wanted it back in metric or probably FSC. I mean, it's different for everybody. But ladies and gentlemen, to talk about the standard or are we back on track as well is something to be actually kind of talked with people who belong to the university background as well or higher education, so that they can kind of guide where we're headed. And God forbid if something like this happens again, God forbid if there's another smart lockdown and the universities are to shut down, if people do not comply to the SOPs, what solutions do we have? And do you think, or do they think, whether the quality of education has gone down in the last 2 years, which I think it had, because there are a lot of memes on the internet these days that a mechanical engineer taking online classes and doing some different stuff. So there are a lot of videos you will get.
Same with doctors though.
Yes, so let's hear it from the horse's mouth, ladies and gentlemen. We're very lucky that we've actually been joined by a pro-rector from the National University of Modern Languages, Islamabad. He happens to be an educationist, a social activist as well, and a social scientist. He is Professor Dr. Muhammad Safir Awan Sahab. Hello, sir. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. How are you?
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting.
Thank you very much, sir. Wonderful to have you. This is how you will see any rector, ladies and gentlemen. You know, they are reserved and they make sure that they maintain their distance from the students as well. They, you know, they really need to be hard on students at times, because otherwise they won't study. But alongside Professor Dr. Muhammad Safir Sahab, ladies and gentlemen, we're lucky that we've actually been joined by an educationist. He happens to be a director at AlHuda International School. He is Mr. Atif Iqbal. Hello, sir. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much for joining us. So, Professor Saab, I'll start with you, sir. Do you think that the standard of education has gone up due to the online classes and everything? Do you think that it has dropped down and that we really need to pick it up again?
Thank you very much. No, I think it's the other way around.
Okay.
Obviously, the standard has gone down drastically because of you know, our change in the medium of instruction, and that was very sudden for the teachers, for the students, for the parents. Nobody was ready to cope with that new, you know, situation.
True.
And pandemic apparently was one thing, but actually in the wake of it, a lot of things came.
True.
And as you know,
As
Shakespeare said that when sorrows come, they come not singly, but in battalions.
True.
So pandemic COVID-19 was that kind of battalion of sorrows and misfortunes for the education sector in particular.
True.
As we know that other sectors have been trying to live with that in more in
And it has been very difficult.
Yeah, but for the education particularly, it has been hit hard throughout the world, and everyone involved, all the stakeholders, this triangle of, you know, students, teachers, parents, administration even, they were caught unawares.
Exactly.
So because of that, you know, many problems multiplied, and universities which were better equipped in comparison to schools and colleges, they quickly built their infrastructure as well. But still, many problems remained. Perhaps the biggest problem was this digital divide, which existed in our population.
Exactly.
If I take the example of my own university, we have students from across Pakistan.
True.
Students from interior Sindh to Gilgit-Baltistan and Kashmir and everywhere, and South Punjab also. So they didn't have even the infrastructure while living and staying at home and connecting with the LMS or CMS of the university.
Exactly. And sir, thank you very much for pointing that out, because I believe that everybody needs to have the right to kind of connect to the Wi-Fi as well. Because
Definitely, yes.
this is something I still remember, Shiza, because even when I was a university student, I still remember that because you get students from all sorts of backgrounds, so our university came up with this plan where we can afford a laptop, and that too on installments. So
Oh,
our
that's
university
good.
started this initiative, which I believe was wonderful, and they equipped every student with laptops, which is great. Now imagine that, because I've been to Namal for a few of my English courses as well. I wanted to sort my English out initially in the early years, so I know how people are, from different backgrounds, and how difficult it is for them to manage to be in the university. So to connect to the the system of the university, and while being in Gilgit-Baltistan where there's no Wi-Fi, I think it's not the students' fault. So obviously, some people have been left behind and some people have been keeping up. But sir, moving on to you, because when we talk about schools, with schools, I think it was, the experience was more horrible. And I'm sorry to say that it's because of the fact that, alhamdulillah, I have an 8-year-old daughter who goes to school. She's in her 3rd grade. And while she was not going to the school, obviously she forgot to write, she forgot to read, and these were the problems. I mean, with university students, once you give them the notes and tell them, hey, you know what, your session is going to take place, they can still prepare. Yeah. But with schools, it was very difficult because the kids forgot, because they already were on a journey which actually started a year or 2 years ago, and they weren't in the practice and they started to forget. So how challenging was it for the schools?
Thank you very much. I think schools were impacted the most, and education sector was the most impacted sector, maybe after the healthcare, because as soon as the pandemic started, close to 190 countries closed down their schools, and that affected about 1.6 billion learners worldwide. That's about 94% of the young population that is there. And you're right that the universities mostly have independent learners who can teach themselves.
Sort it out, yeah.
They can take care of themselves.
Ho jayega, yaar.
But on the other hand, the school children, they have to be taught. They have to be nurtured, they have to be looked after. And especially with the pandemic, when everything went online, and as a matter of fact, most of the schools did not even have an online system in place where they can impart education to their students. So it was a very challenging and difficult time, not only for the students themselves, because they had to go through such an emotional pressure, not meeting their friends, not going to the school, being in an environment and learning which they are not comfortable with. And of course, on the other hand, their parents, you must have seen all the horror stories that are there on the internet, parents yelling at the children on camera and making them sit in front of a computer, which is not natural for them because they're not used to of learning in that manner. And of course, with those educators and teachers who had to take care of their children at the same time they were teaching and looking after their household work. So it's been very challenging, I think, for everyone, and students have been affected the most. And I personally believe that we don't really know the impact COVID has created on education yet, because the learning loss has to be calculated.
Exactly.
Over a period of years, right?
And it's just that it's intangible for now, and I think it will take another year to kind of assess that, what kind of losses we've been through within the education sector. But sir, there's one more thing, and as a concerned parent, I'm going to put it in front of you, because the single national curriculum has been implemented, alhamdulillah, and then all of a sudden when all these students went back to schools, so the single national curriculum books were there. I mean, the books which they haven't seen in their entire life, I cannot even kind of come up with the names or the titles of the books as well, because they were very different. Because once we were in school, it was Maushirti, Ulum, and stuff like that. So something like that in relation to the kids haven't seen them. Now there's been a constant pressure onto the teachers as well, where they really need to kind of go through the syllabi by the end of probably this year or next year as well. So what they're doing is they're trying to push children. So what they do is usually now, this is something which has happened in my daughter's school, that they will actually kind of put commas onto a paragraph and be like, hey, you know what, iski imla tayar karke aaye, or you know, probably I'll be asking you about the spellings, where the kid does not even know how to read it. So imagine, don't you think that there needs to be a balance within the push and the pull, because the students are obviously at the receiving end, but the teacher, if they will continuously push, the students will be a little disturbed. Don't you think that the schools really need to give them time to kind of get back into that pace?
You're very right that this was more of a political move than something which was favorable for the students themselves. And we as educationists do understand that any change needs time, and especially with young learners. I mean, they take much more time than what adults need to take. So it's a very challenging time for students, because they were out of school for quite some time. Then they returned to the school. They had a new set of books. As a matter of fact, some of the books were not even there for them, and they had to do some online research and maybe go through some online material just to prepare for that specific subject. So it's been a very challenging time for them. What I believe is every change needs time, and the government needs to understand that. The teachers on their end, of course, they have a responsibility, and they have a duty to impart education to these young learners. But at the same time, most of the strategy-related matters, of course, they come from the government. Smaller schools can't do that. Private schools can't do that. It's basically a kind of strategy that comes from the government, and then it's rolled out and implemented throughout the country. So I think the government has been a bit quick in rolling out this initiative.
I think they've noted your message. Yes.
It's definitely a wonderful idea to have a single national curriculum, but we also need to understand that a national curriculum is not a set of books that need to be taught to the students.
Exactly.
It's a different framework. It's a
different
mindset
thought process
that needs to be put in.
Wonderful.
I think that was the intention, first of all, you know, to change the mindset, and we really hope we get there. But Professor Saab, you know, the pandemic hit everyone differently in a way that it hit some people harder than the others. So a lot of people who lost their jobs weren't sending their their kids back to universities or schools. Are there some students of yours who unfortunately couldn't make it back after the pandemic, first of all? And if there are some of such people, is the institution doing something for them? Because everyone deserves to receive education no matter what they went through.
Wonderful,
Yeah. Actually, as I earlier said, because of this divide, digital divide, this divide also exists in economic terms.
Yes.
And also in public sector and private sector terms. In private sector, teachers, administration, students, everyone was badly impacted, more impacted than in the public sector.
Okay.
Because in public sector, for example, the fee structure is comparatively affordable.
Yeah.
And at the same time, universities had certain system in place, financial support systems.
Okay.
And there are, many, for example, government's initiative of ISAS scholarships program.
Yes.
Pakistan Baitul Mal also, offering scholarships to the needy students. And certain universities themselves, they contribute in terms of concession in the fee.
Okay.
But having said that, still there have been students, and still there are students who couldn't make it back as earlier. They were, for example, in a better position. So some of them opted for freezing of semester.
Oh, okay.
Because of financial reasons.
Right.
And then they, gathered some resources and they came back. But again, I mean, it depends upon the leadership of each university and each institution.
That's true.
How they cope with this kind of situation. Some of them, come up with very reasonable plans to help students in need and in trouble.
Yeah, that's true, and I really hope it's a great thing actually, how you're letting them actually have the option of freezing the semester or probably still taking the classes online if you can't make it all the way to Islamabad over here. But I forgot my question.
It's particularly alright because I actually had one, and so I kept on telling her that I have a question. She was like, no, I actually need to add on something.
Sorry.
But you will get this opportunity again. But sir, now there's one more thing, and that is obviously we as parents, we always think about our kids and the kind of information they're getting or knowledge they're getting, and we're very concerned about it. But what we tend to forget is that there might be a few requirements by the teachers, professors, universities and institutes as well, which needs to be filled or probably fulfilled by the institute itself to kind of look after that. you know, they're at a comfortable zone and making sure that the kind of knowledge which needs to be imparted is being imparted. Now, from a professor's perspective, from a pro-rector's perspective, and you said as a director's perspective of a school, what kind of assistance you might require from time to time as well to make sure that everything kind of falls into place as well, that the supply chain continues to go on? Because it's not just education when we are talking about an institution, it's human resource, it's management, and there are a lot of other things. So what is your perspective, what is your take on this, that hey, you know what, you really need to kind of think of us as humans, and these are the things that we need as well? Because when we talk about a pandemic, sir, God forbid, unfortunately, there are a lot of people who are actually missing out on their loved ones as well.
Yeah.
Amongst families, there are 3 people who are dead, God forbid, of this pandemic. There are either 2, either 1, and everybody's going through a trauma, and it has been a challenge for everyone. So how did teachers cope up with that?
Yeah. As I earlier said, that it's a triangle, and everyone involved, all stakeholders, they have been impacted badly. If you look at the students, I call them the COVID generation students. And you are right to say that a few years down the road, when they will be joining their professions, believe me, they won't be as good professionals as those who got the chance to be on campus and study face to face. This is one thing. Second, very important factor, and these factors have been counted by in a number of studies. UNESCO has also come up with a very comprehensive study of the impact of COVID on in education sector. And one of those problems pointed out by a number of scholars is the psychological impact of the COVID because of staying back home. I mean, particularly our female teachers and our female students who had to stay back home for online classes. They have been, you know, forced to do the home chores as well while teaching, and some of the, you know, funny things.
It's all over the internet. It's all over the internet.
Yeah. So psychological pressure was too much, and now when people are coming back, believe me, our psychiatrist is very busy at the university.
Exactly.
A number of teachers and students who are coming to her for advice.
Because while you're on the laptop, you cannot even lock your door. You cannot keep your partner outside as well. They're going to be banging the door, and we're like, "What are you doing inside? Come on, let me in."
You know, there were literally
Things
times
like
when
that.
I was because that time I was studying as well when the pandemic started. So I'm taking my class online, and my phone is at the sink, and I'm washing the dishes. So you know, things happen altogether.
Sir, your take on this as well. What would teachers require?
Well, teachers would need a lot of counseling, that's for sure, because they've been through a lot in the past couple of years. And especially when it comes to, I think it goes both ways. The students have lost a lot of learning during this time, but teachers, they were actually trained to take care of the students in a very different manner. They used to hug the students, especially with the younger students. They used to pat them on their back. But all that has finished now. So teacher feel that disconnect, especially with the young learners. And she just feels that she's unable to give out what she was trained to do. She's not fulfilling her professional duty.
Exactly.
And that is a mental trauma that she's going through every day. And on the other hand, of course, the receiving end, that's young child is unable to get that love and affection from the teacher. So I think it will take some time for teachers to get over this mental trauma and to find devise new ways to actually connect with the learners.
Oh, that's wonderful, and I guess that it's
very
a
well
wonderful,
explained actually.
It's a wonderful message to kind of wrap up the program as well. But thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Wonderful to have you. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. And for everybody who's out there, ladies and gentlemen, please make sure that you share the love with the teachers too as well. Please make sure that you do not act like as one of those parents as if you want your kid to be a Newton in like 5th grade or 3rd grade as well. So please make sure you cut everybody a slack, give them that space. Everybody has gone through it. It wasn't just you or your kid. It was the teacher, his family, or her family, their kids as well. Please, I think we really need to have a balance over here. Give them some time. And the teachers, please make sure that you do not push the kids to that extent where, you know, it's so hard for them that they actually feel like giving up on education as well. Please make sure that we maintain a balance.